Hello, welcome to the Behavioral Finance Dialogues on Corona Crisis video series. My name is Gulnur Muradoglu. I'm a professor of finance and director of the Behavioral Finance Working Group. I work for the School of Business and Management at Queen Mary University of London. Today, I will be speaking to my colleague, Dr. Pantelis Solomon of Behavioural Insights Team. We will discuss how behavioral insights can be applied to help people cope with the financial impact of the crisis and get back on track. If you enjoy this video, please share it and subscribe to the Queen Mary University of London YouTube channel. And please come back and listen to the other talks in the series.
First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure, and I think there's a lot of scope for behavioral science to help people navigate through this crisis. So it's now clear that crisis is having a pretty large impact on household incomes. So according to recent estimates, more than 1 in 4 households have experienced a reduction in income, and unfortunately, this is a very kind of regressive crisis in that it's affecting those that are less resilient. In fact, actually, some of the households that, the high-income households have kind of benefited due to the reduction in spending. And so we see a lot of people are kind of coping with the crisis by, dipping on their savings or accessing credit. And obviously, the government kind of payment holidays have been a kind of welcome reprieve for many of them. So in this situation, behavioral science can really kind of help people understand, kind of navigate through this kind of this crisis, this situation, and hopefully minimize the damage on their finances in the short term, but also help them rebuild afterwards.
Okay, so can you give us some examples of the type of work that you're conducting, or how you can help them to get through the crisis or after the crisis? Yes. Any suggestions about that?
Yes. So the first area where we can offer some kind of valuable insights is around kind of helping people kind of when they use the credit, kind of to access and use credit. So we've seen now that so it's estimated that around 4 million people now have had to borrow to cover their essential needs, and the situation is probably going to worsen because people are accumulating larger and larger amounts of debt, and so some estimates show there's around £6 billion in arrears. So what we can do is help people access affordable credit, but also manage their use of credit. So the challenge, I think, with many people at the moment is that many of the decisions are made under duress, because they're very stressed and they have a lot of things to worry about. Some of them are actually hoarding credit because they're worried about what happens in the future. And so in behavioral science, this is known as a scarcity mindset. When you're stressed, you have limited bandwidth to deal with complex decisions. And obviously, this is particularly important in financial services because products are quite complex. You have complex terms and conditions and things like that. So we actually found that many people, not surprisingly, they ignore the information by credit card providers, for example. They also ignore the summary disclosure that they provide. So what we found is actually that if we simplify disclosure even more, for example, by presenting the most important information, the most important charges, for example, in a list of kind of key facts, that improves comprehension significantly. So I think the providers can do more in terms of helping people understand, the credit that they're buying. The other thing we researched on was that kind of static statements can go so far in helping people understand their credit charges. And actually what you need is something a little bit more interactive, because most people can't really do compounding, for example. So you have something like a slider, something in a kind of interactive interface where people can see that, okay, if I increase my monthly payment, for example, by this much, this is how much I'm saving, then this is going to help them better understand and hopefully increase their payments and reduce their debt. So we've done some online testing around this with very promising results. And now we're actually testing some of these interventions in the field with major credit card providers. We should hopefully have results on that next year.
So do you think that they will help people making better decisions in accessing credit or in the way that they use the credit, or in the way that they design their payment holidays?
Absolutely. And I think in terms of people making decisions about whether they need the credit, this is another area I think that we need to help people to make better decisions. And for example, simple rules of thumb can help people manage the uncertainty. So for example, you can tell people, if you're losing sort of X% of your income, this is how much credit you should use. So in order to help people navigate a little bit, kind of understand a little bit how much credit they need. The other thing you can do as well is signpost people to guidance. There's many good bodies out there, organizations like the Money and Pension Service, Step Change, for example. Can we signpost people to guidance or debt advice? Because a lot of the information out there right now, people are overwhelmed with information. So what you need there is to kind of make the advice, make the guidance as relevant as possible. So rather than, for example, sending them on a landing page where it kind of has a kind of generic information, try and make the information as specific as possible. The other thing we can do as well in terms of helping people stick to their commitments, for example, and repaying their credits, is to use their social networks. Right? You can, people can set up, for example, voluntary social network commitment schemes, for example, to repay once they get the credit. We've been testing an intervention where people can nominate a supporter to help them with their goals. So we've successfully applied that in the education space, where students can nominate a supporter to help them study. But we've been trying to apply this also in the financial world, where people can nominate, for example, either a savings supporter or a credit supporter that can support them in that. And then we can help kind of curate that relationship in order to help people stick to their goals.
It's a difficult time for everyone. I mean, some people are on furlough, some people have lost their jobs already, some people feel uncertain about their jobs, and still people have to make a lot of financial decisions. So in those decisions, especially in savings decisions, because they might have to postpone some of their consumption and save for the future, or save even for the next month, next year, etc. So how do you help them in gaining habits for saving for the future and making better decisions for themselves?
So that's a really good question, and I think, despite the crisis and despite the kind of a negative impact of the crisis, I think for certain households, and there's obviously households that have kind of seen a large reduction in their income and are kind of struggling in this environment, but at the same time, there are households that are seen a kind of rise in their disposable income due to the drop in spending. So, for example, at the beginning of the crisis, the IFS estimated that around a quarter of our spending has been discouraged, things like traveling, for example. And there's other research that shows that from CBRE were showing that excess household savings of kind of around 23 billion. So it does present an opportunity for people to save, but also to kind of maintain a healthy savings habit. And when you see kind of previous research on why people didn't save, people said they either couldn't afford to, or they just didn't need to, or haven't thought about it. So kind of the crisis, in a way, kind of provides a unique opportunity to shift some of those perceptions. First, because people are saving enough, sufficient amounts of money for the first time. So it's almost like a proof of concept. So for those who would say, well, I can't afford to save, this is kind of a proof that if you reduce your spending, you can actually save. And also, it does change the perceptions around the need for saving, because the kind of the crisis is quite salient in people's mind. In behavioral science, this is known as the availability heuristic, right? So we assess risk based on how easy it is to record that risk. So at the same time, I should highlight that kind of this window of opportunity is likely to kind of last for kind of a short while, because to some extent, people are going to go back to their old habits. And indeed, some research shows that people are kind of saving up kind of to indulge. So what we need to do in order to get people to to set up a good savings habit is, one thing you can do is to get people to commit. So a great way to get people to commit to savings is a payroll savings scheme. So a payroll savings scheme effectively automatically deduces kind of a portion of your income every month and puts that into a savings account. So the kind of the appeal of that is because of the kind of automation and the easiness of it, people are kind of more likely to kind of, once they do that, because they kind of draws in this power of default, kind of makes it easier and psychologically less painful to save, because once it's done, then the kind of the payments become habituated. So actually, if you get people to commit now, it's kind of the idea is kind of quite fresh in their minds, then in 6 months' time they'll be saving, but they will have kind of, once the impact of the crisis kind of dissipated, the savings habit will persist. The other thing you can do to kind of motivate people is to show them that, because you kind of encourage them to convert the lockdown savings into a rainy day savings fund. And because they've saved some money already, that's likely to encourage them to save even more. So research shows that if somebody has kind of made progress towards a goal already, they're more motivated to keep going. So this is known as endowed progress. So the fact that people have savings already, I think, is likely to kind of get them going. The other thing you can do is, for example, you can get people to split their savings into different pots. So you can have like a rainy day savings pot, and then maybe a post-lockdown indulgences pot, like for example, holidays or things like that, so that you kind of make it more fun and more appealing, so that people are not feeling that they just need to save, but actually they can put money aside. So this notion, as you know, is kind of in behavioral economics is known as kind of mental accounting, the fact that we make kind of arbitrary divisions of fungible things like money or time. So you can use that to your advantage here by getting people to split into different accounts, for example.
And
finally,
and how do you communicate all these different helpful methods to the people? Is it through the banking system?
So I think this can be done through providers. So for example, in a large program of work we have with the Money and Pension Service, we're working with banks, fintech startups. So you can do that through products, through providers. You can do that through the communication channels of the bank, be that through email, letters, but also through the app itself, embedding yourself in the customer journey. There's several ways you can do that.
Okay, I think it's a very sharp idea. It's kind of like to turn the crisis to an opportunity, isn't it?
Yes.
For many households. So if you can turn it to an opportunity to understand your basic needs and how can you save, and then to get a taste of savings, and then maybe come up with ways of saving into the future, and maybe the crisis itself kind of like imposes a reason for savings as well for the rainy day, because it's kind of like, well, you never think the rainy day will come, but it came.
Yes.
Okay,
exactly.
so it can come for different reasons again in the future. And so I think it's a wonderful way of turning the crisis into an opportunity for households.
Yes, and also I very much agreed. And also, you asked earlier around kind of the different touch points about how to engage with consumers. Another way is to think about also the payment holidays and the end of the payment holidays as an opportunity, because there's a large number of people now that have taken payment holidays. I think something in the order of 2.7 million. So this is a great touch point for providers to get in touch with their customers and proactively reach out and to get them to think about their future. So we've kind of done research that shows that people are more likely to make changes in their lives when they're already going through a major transition. For example, we found that people are more likely to take up cycling when they moved house, for example. There's other research that shows that people are more incentivized to set new targets when they have kind of these arbitrary, temporal thresholds. Like, for example, the first of the year or the first of the month. So this is known as a fresh start effect. So what you can do is that you can actually use the end of the payment holiday as an opportunity to get people to plan. For example, you can get them to start planning about how they're going to repay their debt, for example. And we've kind of found that if you encourage people to plan their future actions, that increases the likelihood that they're actually going to carry out the behavior that they wanted to engage in. And so one of the tools we've used, for example, is one called implementation intentions, where what this involves is you carry out a pre-specified action when a particular cue or event happens. So if X happens, I will do Y. So thinking around kind of, for example, people are coming out of a payment holiday. If this is my kind of the monthly payment, this is how much I need to save, for example. You can use simple rules of thumb, as I mentioned earlier. When you want people to change their habits, what you want to make it easier, and you want to make it kind of simple. So this simple rules of thumb, like, for example, if you want to get people to eat healthier, tell them to eat 5 a day rather than eat healthy, something a little bit vague. So you need to be kind of specific. So we can use some of the same principles here as well.
Thank you very much. I think that was a very interesting talk. This time, normally during a crisis, the discussion is for companies, isn't it? So if you can turn a crisis into an opportunity for you, but this time it's about the households. Can the households turn the crisis into an opportunity for themselves? And we've discussed that, yes, they can. Yes. So by having new habits and by understanding why they would need the money in the future, the importance of savings, and the different ways of making savings. Thank you very much, Pantelis.
A pleasure. Thank you, Gulnur.